Clock says it's pretty much 8:30. We're good. We have quite a Terashah this week, but we're also in the month of Elul. And so before we get to the Terashah, I just want to say a few things that I want you to be thinking about. Each and every one of you should be thinking about this. And that is, what is our goal during this month of Elul? Elul is a month that prepares us, as you know, for Rosh Hashanah. And Rosh Hashanah, of course, is our judgment. So what's our goals? We all should have goals. And what should we be thinking? What should we be doing? What should we be trying to accomplish? There's no answers to these. These are just questions I want you to think about. The basic answer is that in Elul, we are to work on our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what we're supposed to do. Elul is, if you know Hebrew, it's the Rashi Tevot, Ani Ledodi V'Dodi Li, the first letter, Aleph of Elul, the second letter, the third letter, the fourth letter, spells out the first letter of a sentence. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to mine. Hopefully you all know about this beautiful pasuk. So our beloved is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Almighty God. And Elul is the time to work on strengthening our relationship with Him. So the question is, okay, good, Rabbi, thanks. You told me I should work on my relationship with God. Wonderful, tremendous. You did a good job. How do you do that? And that's the question. How do you work on your relationship with God? It's an easy thing to say. It's a hard thing to do. Well, let's say a husband wants to work on his relationship with a wife. Or it could be the wife wants to work on her relationship with her husband. But basically, what does he have to do? What does he have to do? The guy wants to work on his relationship with his wife. What does he have to do? He's got to pay attention to her, right? He's got to spend more time with her. He has to have more meaningful conversations with her. Or if he doesn't want to, at least pretend that he's listening to her, okay? You got to do something. You got to do it. And Elul is our chance to strengthen our relationship with Almighty God. How do we do that? It's the time that when we do mitzvot, do it with more thought, with more sincerity, like we spoke last week. When you say modeh ani, mean it, Baruch Atah, are you talking to God? It's time to spend more time in learning, because there's time. You ever hear of the Hasidim? They do what's called hitbodedut. Ever hear this? Yeah. Where they go out to the forest and they sit by themselves and they start screaming all these things, and it's I don't know. It's thanking God for all that we have and telling God that you love Him and talking to God. You tell someone you're talking to God, you think they're going to lock you up in a crazy house. But that's what we do. That's what our tefillah is supposed to be doing. We're talking to God. It's a time to tell Hashem that, yes, we want to be closer to you. And so in Elul, we should all have more kavanah, more intent, more focus. When you say a beracha, when you say a blessing, have more intent. You're saying this blessing for God, thanking Him for the food that you're eating, or for being able to go to the restroom. It's just an amazing thing. It's not a polite thing to say in a synagogue, but I had a hip replacement about two and a half months ago, and they gave me these pain medications. I didn't want to take them, and they insisted I take it because I had some complications, and I took them, and it was 5 days I couldn't use the restroom. It was the most painful thing in my life, worse than all the surgery I went through. So when we have a bracha that thanks God that our system is working, and we take it for granted, and lose the time to stop the clock and say, wait a minute, God, I am grateful that my system works. I am grateful for this food that I'm eating. I'm grateful that I have friends. I'm grateful I have a class. I'm grateful I have a community, a place to go hang out on Shabbat and be with normal people, good people, decent people. So Elul is not just the ordinary month. When I give you your test, what are the holidays in each month, and you get the Rosh Hashanah, you get all the holidays in Rosh Hashanah, the overabundance of holidays in Rosh Hashanah, and not too many holidays. And you get to Nisan, you got Pesach, and then you got Shavuot and Sivan, and then there's not too much. There's nothing in Elul. Yes, we're focused on Teshuvah. we're focused on improving ourselves. That's what we have to do. And how many people really do that? But that's what you're supposed to do. So that's my introduction. I want to tell you about the parasha we have today. It's called Ki Tetzei. In this parasha, we have something like 74 mitzvot. And just don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of them tonight. Okay. But I'll deal with a couple of them. But largely, they deal with relationships and sensitivity towards others. Pay attention to the first couple of them, because they kind of have a chain reaction, a sequence almost. It begins with something that we're going to spend a minute talking about in a little bit. A soldier goes to war, and he sees amongst the captives a beautiful woman, and he desires her. The Torah actually allows him to take her, to have relations with her, and then to take her home and decide at that point if he still wants her to be his wife. If so, he has to convert her and bring her into the Jewish people. We can talk about that in a little bit. Don't jump on me yet. I'll give you a chance. And then the next thing the Torah talks about right after that is, lo and behold, the guy's got two wives, and one he loves and one he hates. And the next thing right after that the Torah talks about is called the Ben Sorer Umoreh, the wayward and rebellious son. Well, gee, guy goes to war, sees a woman, takes her and says, okay, you're mine, come here. It's Fred Flintstone, come here, grabs her, you're mine. And he takes her home, and then he ends up, maybe he's regretting his decision, maybe after a while, the most beautiful, talented, amazing, exotic woman in the world is the ugliest thing that he's ever seen in his life, and he can't stand being around her. And he has a kid with her, and the kid grows up to be this rebellious, wayward son. And by the way, you think you're mad about me about the soldier being able to take the woman? You know what the Torah says to do with this rebellious son? You take him to the elders of the city, and you say he didn't listen to our voice, and they kill him. They execute him. He's a kid. We're killing kids now. So we're allowing basically rape, and we're saying, yeah, you can have two wives, even if you end up hating one, it's okay. And then we don't worry about the kid. If he's bad, we'll just kill him. What is going on here? Did I get your attention so far? Good. All right. I'll see you next week. By the way, I think Rabbi Block will be back for next week, right?
Yes.
Coming Monday. Right. Some of the other mitzvot have to do, I'll just mention them briefly because there's just a couple categories it's important to know. And then we'll talk about the killer ones that nobody wants to talk about. Some of the various mitzvot include returning a lost item and this mitzvah of sending away the mother bird, which is an amazing, amazing mitzvah. I highly recommend you find it in the Chumash and read the commentaries. The art scroll is great. It talks about forbidden mixtures, cases of forbidden relationships, holiness to the Jewish camp. We have to be holy as a camp, as a people. Torah talks about the evils of prostitution, of charging interest, of keeping vows, and the laws of giving a get. You know what a get is? A get is a Jewish divorce. The word get is made up of two letters, Gimel and Tet. And I promise you, I've checked. You start from the beginning of Torah, and you go through every letter, and you never find a Gimel and a Tet next to each other in Torah, not forwards and not backwards. It's not something that we like to do. But if there's an unhappy marriage, there's nothing worse than an unhappy marriage, and it has to be ended. You got to do everything you can to avoid that. But if it gets to the point that you can't, and you can't salvage it, then there is a process for a get. There are mitzvot that largely deal with what lenders can take as collateral. A guy comes to you and he begs you, please, 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 lend me $50. That's all I need, and I'm gonna buy this, and I'm gonna sell that, and I'm gonna make some profit. You say, well, give me some collateral. The guy's homeless, and the guy's sleeping under a bridge in a cardboard box, and he's got one possession. He's got a blanket. That's the only thing he has that's worth anything of value. Are you allowed to take his blanket as collateral? Like, he wants money from you, right? And if you don't get some collateral that you can sell if he doesn't pay you back, you might never see your money again. Are you allowed to take that one single only blanket? So that's in there as well. I'm not giving you all the laws tonight. I'm just letting you know what's in there to look. My job is not to teach you. My job is to make you think. That's all I want to do. I don't ever want to make anyone religious. I don't ever want to make anyone follow my way. It's not the only way. I just want you to open your mind, and that's my job. We have mitzvot, paying workers on time. Sensitivity towards the convert is in this parasha, and leaving corners of the field, leket shichan peyah for the poor, honesty in business. There's a thing called remembering Amalek, and there's also something called yibum and chalitza. Anyone know what those two terms mean? Yibum and chalitza?
When your father passed away and you're gonna get married with his
right.
wife.
A man dies without any children. He's married, and he didn't have any children with his wife. And he's got a brother who's not married. So the brother has a mitzvah from the Torah to go marry his dead brother's wife. And to have children with her and call the children after the dead brother so that you keep the dead brother's family name alive. Sometimes this is just not a workable situation. You know, families are families, and not every group of people can get along together. And so what happens is, if he wants to do the mitzvah, that's called the yibum. If he doesn't want to do it, he has to do a procedure called chalitza, where he removes a sandal from her foot. Sandal is like a shoe, is like protection for the foot. He was supposed to be her protection. He was supposed to, and he removes that, saying, you don't want me, I don't want you, done, we're finished with each other. I've seen this ceremony. It's an amazing thing. It's not something you see every day.
This is seen in Ruth.
Yeah, that's what she did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the gate.
Yeah, exactly right.
Boaz.
Okay. Anyways, so we can talk a lot about what you should be thinking about this time of year. Why does the parasha come this time of year, and why is it talking about all these different types of things? It's talking to us. There's no question about it. But the first topic I want to talk about is this thing called the Eshet Yifat Toar, and that's the case where the soldier goes to war, and they win, and they're taking all the spoils and all the and they took captives, and among the captives he sees this woman, and he can't live without her. He's drawn to her, and he's got to have her. And so about 30 years ago, there was a group of Americans, not religious but Jewish, and they went on a tour to Israel, men and women, all college graduates, and they went to connect with the land of Israel. There's all these programs that want to take our young people to Israel and get them to love the land, and maybe they'll become advocates for the land of Israel. So they took this group of 30 secular Jews in America. Some knew a little bit of Torah, some knew no Torah, okay? And they stop, and they're there for a month. In their first week, they stop in the yeshiva for Ba'alei Teshuvah. They have some yeshivot in Israel that specialize in people that were not living religious lives their whole life, and then they're 25 years old. They wake up one day and they go, "Oh, I've done so much bad. There's got to be a better way." So there's a yeshiva you can go to specifically for Ba'al Teshuvah. Okay, it's great. It's great. So they went to one of these yeshivot for an afternoon. They walk in the room. They're sitting down there, and then a rabbi walks in and he says, "Great to meet you guys. Anything specific you want to talk about? I'll talk about any topic. I don't care." That's what they're trained to do. They work with Ba'alei Teshuvah. They've had every challenge. So one guy, he sees up on the shelf and he sees a bunch of the art scroll Chumashim, just like this one. And he says, "Hey, Rabbi, could we learn the week's Torah portion?" It's fine. And it was the summer like it is now. And it was the parasha like we have now. What's the name of this parasha, by the way? Ki Tetzei. And so the rabbi passes out the books, and they all open up the books and they start reading. And the first law that they read about is when you go to war, you're a Jewish soldier, and you see this woman, and you've got to have her. You're allowed to have her. And then you take her home. And then if you want, marry her. If you don't, get rid of her. And it's like this lady was there, and she says, "This is so uncharacteristic of the Torah, of what we've learned in other places. it's my God, she was so upset, this woman, and she says, how can the Torah permit soldiers basically to rape and capture women in battle and then keeping them against their will? Is this consistent with everything else we've learned about Torah? Does this make any sense? So she's upset about that, and she wants to have this conversation. And the rabbi is getting ready. He's got an answer. They're prepared for everything. Anything you ask them, they've thought about. Believe me, there's manuals. I've seen them. There's nothing these guys can't talk about. Then someone dug up a 10-year-old article online. He says, hey, Rabbi, you know what I want? I want you to respond to this. There was an Arab woman. She was a teacher, actually. Her name was Nalia Awad. And she ran an organization called Women Against Violence. WAV, Women Against Violence. And she made a claim. And she said to this group, in the article, she claimed this, and this guy's reading it in the group, that Israeli soldiers are sexually abusing Palestinian women. She wrote that in an online article. Now, she had no proof for this. She had no sources for this. It was just something she said. Immediately in those days, they would suspend you from your job as a journalist if you did something so stupid like that. Like today, it's like you make stuff up and you're a hero, But so she was suspended, and as she was suspended, she made a very crazy statement. She said, during war, Jewish men can take women, implying that Jews are encouraged to rape the women of the enemy. That's what she said. And so that's in the article and everything is there. So digging deeper, so these guys wanted a response, not only to the soldiers going to take in this woman, but now, boy, I dug myself in a good hole tonight, right?
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get out of this one. So the truth is, the lies promoted by our enemies are usually unending. There's no end to them in sight. And usually they're so far from the truth. And they claim that the Israeli rabbis for the army, the army has their own chief rabbi. You know that? The Israeli army has the Rabbi Rashi of the Tzava. And Rabbi Goren used to have that position before he became a chief rabbi years ago. And that the chief rabbis, they said, were permitting Jewish soldiers to rape Palestinian women. Chas v'shalom. That was the claim. So the truth is exactly the opposite. Now, there were some claims from 1949 and 1950 that we just didn't know how to even answer in those days. We were so busy being bombarded by all the Arabs from different nations and different sides. But from 1950 on, there was, they kept data. But in any case, from 2007 to 2014, the Israeli police, I'm looking at my notes here, there was Arab men committed between 2007 and 2014, 7 years, there was 533 sexual offenses against Jewish women, of which 70 of them were outright cases of rape. Okay, 70 cases, 533 sexual offenses in 7 years. In many cases, the rapists, they called their victims dirty Jews, explaining that Jews were subhuman and Jewish girls have no honor, so we can do whatever we want to them. Okay, so that doesn't seem, it seems like a high number. What about the opposite side? What about the Israelis committing crimes, sexual crimes against Arab women? Well, from 1950 all the way up to around the time of that report of 2014, there was not one single case of a complaint of an Arab woman against any of an Arab who made any complaints against an Israeli soldier on sexual misconduct or rape. Not one case. So now, how do you explain this, right? So now the liberals, the leftists, the nuts, they're all like, well, what are we going to do? So in 2014, when this article came out, I shouldn't spend so much time on this, but there was a Israeli student at Hebrew U, a woman. She goes, I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why the Jews don't rape the Palestinian women. You know why? Because they're racist. Okay? It's impossible to rape someone who is not human, she wrote. How do you win conversations like this? She couldn't be further from the truth. When we look to the Torah, you have to open your eyes. You have to understand the world then and the world now over the past 2,000 years. Okay? We saw a country go back 20 years overnight in Afghanistan. A country that was becoming modern go back 20 years. Overnight, we saw it, right? You all saw it this week? Okay? All right. So now, I want to discuss this halakha a little bit. What is this Eshet Yifat Torah? You see this beautiful woman, you have to have her. What's going on here? So I'm going to try and explain it one or two different ways. And there's no end to the conversations that you can have on this. But I just ask you to be respectful and to consider who and what we're talking about. And God was not stupid. He's not putting this here to give you information to attack him. He's putting it here for a reason, because we have something to learn. So again, the Torah describes how a Jewish soldier goes to work. He goes out to war. He desires this non-Jewish woman. He is permitted to have a sexual encounter with her, but then he must bring her home. And he's got to do all these things to make her ugly in his eyes. In other words, he's got to shave her head for 30 days, either let her nails grow or cut her nails, whatever one's going to make her uglier, take off the beautiful clothes that they had when they were in, go out to war. They would dress nice to distract the soldiers and put on sackcloth and ugly clothes for mourning, because probably her parents were killed in the attack. So she has to mourn them and she has to do all this different stuff. And only then, if he looks at her after 30 days and he says, yeah, I still want you. I still think you're that incredible woman. I think you would make a wonderful mother and a wife. And I want you. Then he can have her converted and marry her. But if it was only a lust kind of thing, and after seeing her without her makeup and her nails all messed up and her hair all messed up and in clothes that were not very flattering, now if he realizes she's just another girl, I don't want her, what am I doing with her? So then you can get rid of her. Okay? So now what's going on over here? Why does the Torah allow the soldier to have relations with this non-Jewish woman? The Torah usually demands tremendous restraint from us. I mean, this is the soldier is permitted to give in to what we call his Yetzer Hara. Why did he want this woman? That was his evil inclination. I want her. It's not for you. It's not for you. You're there to win the war. Focus on winning the war. You get a little bit distracted, that's your evil inclination. There is an interpretation of the Or HaChaim. The Or HaChaim was a tremendous rabbi that explained the depths of the Torah. And he explains to us the depths that we have to study the Torah to avoid reaching incorrect conclusions. You understand what I'm saying? It's like, I brought up the topic. Now you owe it to me to open up your minds and listen. He explained like this. You know who goes to war? What kind of soldiers go to war in the Jewish army? Only the most religious go to the war. We're talking about tzaddikim. We're talking about righteous people. And if one of them, I'm going to open your mind up on this, I promise you. If one of these guys, imagine for a minute, he's righteous, he's really good person, right? He's a rabbi, he's a this and that, he's good. And he goes to war and he sees a woman and he's drawn to her. You think he's really drawn to her external beauty? There's something going on there. He sees in her a spark. Just like you have a spark inside you that made you want to do this crazy thing you're doing in your lives. There's a spark inside of you, right? I gotta find out more about Judaism. I gotta find out more about Torah. I gotta find out more. I gotta join this people. I gotta know so I can decide. So he was not attracted to her physical appearance, but because of that spark that was in her soul that he connected with. And if indeed this woman does have such a holy spark within her, not only is he allowed to, but he's encouraged to marry her and to convert her to Judaism and to marry her. That's the sparks amongst the Goyim, that their souls were at Mount Sinai. We have to bring them back in. If someone is a convert, you know what that means? You know what it means? It means that their neshama was at Mount Sinai. But they weren't born into the Jewish people, but they wanted to be part. So there's a spark in them. And this guy, this soldier, this religious soldier, he saw it, he connected to it, and it's an opportunity. It really is. So now you don't hate me so much for saying what I said, dude. It's still difficult. It's still difficult. But so before he did so, he has to make sure that his feelings of attraction were completely spiritual and not physical. And that's why he brings the woman into his home and tries to spoil her appearance. If he does that for a month and he still desires her, even after no makeup, letting her head get shaved or grow out, her nails grow out or get shaved, or whatever is going to make her look the worst, and if he still desires her, that means that he's seeing that spark that's coming out of her. And that's a different story. Now he's a hero. A minute ago, we wanted to put the guy in jail. A minute ago, these women were yelling at the rabbi, how come this, how come that? The Palestinian women, Jews are rapists. The Bible says rape women. The Bible doesn't say rape women. The Bible says you got to know who Jewish soldiers were. If you were not on that level to be a Jewish soldier, they sent you home. That's the guy that was scared. We talked about last week. Or 2 weeks ago. Why was he scared? Because he didn't have the right mitzvot inside of him. He wasn't worthy enough. The guy could put on his tefillin every day, keep Shabbat every day, give tzedakah every day, eat glot, super glot, kosher food only, the highest hashgacha, and he's still scared. Yeah? Because he's not a tzaddik. We don't want you in the army. Go home. We want an army of people that are just going to do the right things. So anyways, if he still has this desire for her, then you have to assume he's drawn to that spark within her soul and that he marries her. To me, that's the simple explanation of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. We call him the holy Orach Chaim. Just an amazing one way of looking at it. You have to realize that human beings are very complex. And we're born, and our parents, if they're smart, they run to the bookstore and they buy all these books. My parents bought Dr. Spock, how to raise a baby. It's amazing. I turned out halfway normal. My kids were raised on some other books and now they're outdated. It's like everyone keeps trying to reinvent the wheel. You were given an instruction book. It came with you when you were born, and that's the Torah. Your parents had the Bible, Jewish, non-Jewish. There's instructions. Like you go, you buy any technical machine, you buy anything, it comes with an instruction manual. My car stopped the other night in the neighborhood I did not want to be in after dark. I had to go do some business there, and I went, and I'm running, and I'm get in there, it won't start. I had to have it towed by a flatbed truck. I had to wait there 2 hours. I was scared. So what did I do? I took out the instruction manual for my car. And I almost figured it out. Almost. There was an instruction manual. It's outdated, I'm sure. The Torahs are instructions for life. It tells you what to do. Look into this story and you see the kind of person that should go to war, the kind of person that if he does have this attraction, and it's not a sexual attraction, it's a spiritual attraction, then maybe there's something to talk about. And so that's that's an important thing. And maybe if we really start to realize that we have a Yetzer Hara, we have an evil inclination, and we're running through this world, and we don't even realize why we're here. The rabbis tell us, look at this world like it's a kind of a hallway called a closed door between where we come from and where we're going to. Right? This is the bridge. Let's call it a bridge. This world's a bridge. And most of the people in this world make the bridge their final location. But you never stop in the middle of a bridge, do you? You use the bridge to get from point A to point B. Point B is where we want a better life, a better world, Olam Haba. And we're using this world and we're stuck. And we're stuck on this bridge over here. Get off the bridge already. This is not what it's all about. I promise you, it's better than this. This world is, you can make it nice. You can do good. You can leave it a better place than you found it. But there's better than this. And a soldier who goes to war, he's focused on going to war. And God says in this case, he's so preoccupied, whatever's going on, God does not hold him responsible. He's given permission to have relations with this world. And by the way, this is so much better than any other society throughout history of rules of war. The rules of war were horrible for every culture, every society. I often explain, I try to get out of trouble a lot, but the Torah says that a man can have more than one wife. Now the custom today is basically you don't. Sephardim, by the way, never really accepted this custom. It was an Ashkenazic custom not to have more than one wife. It's called the Cherem or Rabbeinu Gershom. And but Sephardim, if they want to, they can technically have more than one wife. Now in Israel, they kind of have basic rule. No, we don't do it. But unless you go to ask the Beit Din, and then the Beit Din can give you permission to, you have to be able to afford it. You have to be on a level that you can handle it, and all these different types of things. And when I first met my wife, it was over this conversation in someone's house that men were allowed to have more than one wife. And she thought that was a terrible, terrible idea. And she began to tell me that if I agreed with that, I was a terrible, terrible person. So we got off to a great start. And I said to her, you have to realize one thing. Think about the world 2,000 years ago. The Torah was given 3,300 years ago, so 3,000 years ago. You live in little villages, right? There's no big New Yorks, there's no big LAs. You live where you live, little villages. And there's another village, and you end up going to war because some other guy's village wants to make their size double. They want to become stronger. So they go to war against your village. So who goes out to war? The women? The men go out to war. Now, you go out to war with 100 soldiers. You're lucky if 50 come back. Right? I'm talking the world, the way it was, the villages, fighting each other. If 50 come back, great, 50 lived. That means 50 died. That means that of the 100 wives they left at home, there's only 50 men to take care of them and support them and to make sure that they're going to have something to eat, a place to sleep. So it was almost chesed, it was almost a kindness that the Torah allowed having a second wife. It wasn't just playing up to the man's desires that, you can have 2, 3, 4 women, That's not what it was about. It was about responsibility. What do you do in that case? 50 guys come home from war and there's 100 women waiting for them there. So that means 50 women are going to have to now go to prostitution. They're going to have to now not have a way to pay their rent. Their husbands were working. They don't have that. Women didn't work. They stayed home and were pregnant and barefoot and peeled potatoes and tomatoes and I don't know what they did. Yeah.
And what about the children?
Yeah. And why do they have so many kids? So they can work on the land. Now there's no father around, so this and that. So it was that halachic dispensation of the soldier going to war, of a man being allowed to have more than one wife, that we need to look at it from a Torah point of view. But that's the first topic. I want to jump to the next one, the wayward son. I'm sure if you have a few questions, I'll take them now. If I can answer them, if not, we'll go on. I know you've been waiting.
To take the prisoner or a woman, is that for every tribe, or is that only exclude the Canaanite tribes? You have to exterminate all the people.
Well, there's different types of wars. There's obligational wars that you had to wipe out everyone, and then there's optional wars. Okay, and even in the obligatory war, there's actually two opinions. One says you have to wipe them out completely, the 7 nations. Then there's another opinion that says, no, if they agree to live peacefully and to pay taxes and to get rid of their idols, then they can live in the land of Israel peacefully under our rule. It's like, you can live here, but who are you going to pay tax to us? If you're willing to do that, then you can stay. So there's 2 different schools of thought about what really happened in those times. I don't know the answer.
Right, but that's not explicitly stated in the Torah, right? That if they make the convert and because I thought it said they were going to be a thorn on our
Well,
regardless.
You see clearly that Yehoshua, who led the Jewish people into the land of Israel after Moshe died, did make peace with some of these nations. And sometimes it worked out really well, and at other times they fooled him, they tricked him. They said, "Oh yeah, we're all going to be converts," and then as soon as they turned around, the kippah comes off, and you know the story. So in any case, all right, and I hope I answered it a little bit.
The wars that are not obligational wars, then it's saying optional wars, you could take a woman, but the obligational wars, you can't really take a woman.
Well, so that's a great question. And I don't know how it worked out. I guess if you go with the Orach Chaim's explanation that it was that spark and it was a righteous soldier and they really was serious about it, then probably yes. Because we do have guys that come from the P team. You have Uriah PT, you have other people that might have done it. I don't want to get too much into it because I don't have a concrete answer and I don't like to say things that I don't know. But I've read about it. I just don't remember. But let me keep it in mind. Okay, you're not done with me forever. Next topic, ladies, wake up. We're ready to go. Ben Sorer Moreh, the rebellious and the
wayward.
Fine, wayward son. Thank you. There's someone there. Okay, so we read about a very sad case of Ben Sorer Moreh. This is a rebellious son. And we said his parents must turn him over to the authorities for execution, to be killed on account of the sins that he will eventually, inevitably commit in the future. In other words, what's he doing right now? He's not listening to his mom and dad. He's eating a lot. He's stealing so he gets money to eat and this and that. Did he kill anybody yet? Did he do anything really wrong? He ate a lot. He's a brat. He talked back to his mom and dad. Boy, oh boy. Which one of us hasn't done that? You take him to be executed? I mean, again, what is the Torah doing over here? This is a crazy, crazy parasha. So I'm going to answer you according to the way that the Mishnah in the 8th chapter, primarily of Sanhedrin, answers this. They say, yes, he's executed. Al Shem Sofo, because of his end. In other words, better that he die now, innocent, rather than later than with guilt. That makes sense?
Yes.
Makes sense to you?
Before he does harm to someone else, and then maybe he murders.
How do you know he's going to?
I think it's maybe an issue of his character. Right? But the killing him early would then cut off his chance for Teshuva. That's tough.
Do you know what we read about on Rosh Hashanah? One of the topics in the Torah? We read about Abraham had a son called Yishmael, right? And this kid was a bad influence on Yitzchak. And Sarah told Abraham, take this kid and his mama and get him the heck out of here. And they get sent away. They get sent out to the desert, and they had a little bit of food, a little bit of water, and it runs out. And the kid is dying. And the kid is just
crying.
He's ready to give life. He's almost dead. He's almost dead. And the angels are saying, God, kill him, please. You know why? Because in the future, he's going to come after Isaac, Yitzchak. And he's going to come after the Jewish people and do harm to the Jewish people. Better you kill him now. And God said, no way. Ba'asher hu sham. We judge him where he's at right now. Ba'asher hu sham. Exactly where he's at right now. That's how we're going to judge this guy. Don't tell me what he's going to do 10 years from now. I should kill him now because 10 years from now he's going to commit a sin or he's going to try and commit genocide on the Jewish people. God says, I can't do that. I have to look at him right now. Did he do anything wrong yet? Did he do anything wrong? Yeah, he was not a good influence on his brother. Okay, his brother is on the tzaddik category, he's on the rasha. But did he do anything that's an executable offense? God tells the angels, I don't know what you're talking about. Not gonna happen. That's strange, because over here we have the exact opposite. We have the ben sorer umoreh. We have this wayward and rebellious son. Kill him now, because he's gonna be a punk later on. He's gonna be a brat. You know what? I've been a school teacher. There've been quite a few kids that I would have applied this to. It would not have been very good for my record and reputation. Any thoughts on this one? I mean, don't you see a contradiction in one case in the Torah and the other?
I think that's the difficulty, right? Because if you kill him early, you're judging him early in the sense that who knows if he will do teshuvah.
Okay, can you hang on to the question for a minute? Because you're getting close. Anyone else have any thoughts on it? I want to get there. I want to say a couple more things, if that's all right. Okay, maybe it'll help us clarify your thinking. Better to die now innocent than later with guilt. The Torah says, if the parents have this wayward and rebellious son, and they really rebuked him, they really chastised him, and he still doesn't listen, then they take him to this court, they take him to the elders, and they say to the elders, this son is rebellious, and he does not listen to our voice. Enenu shomea bekolenu. He does not shomea, listen, bekolenu, to our voice. Yeah. Okay? Ours is, there's a noun over there, it becomes plural, but voice is in, So what's going on over here? He does not listen to our voice. So the Gemara in the 8th chapter of Sanhedrin is so uncomfortable with this topic, more than the last topic that I talked about. I mean, they are just the idea of the institution of a ben sorer umoreh, the idea that you're gonna kill a child. I mean, he's not even a teenager, he's a kid. That the way that the rabbis in the Gemara and the Talmud interpret these sentences in the Talmud, they raise the bar. They raise the bar to a case where it's almost impossible to ever execute a child like this. As a matter of fact, the Gemara even suggests, lo haya v'lo yeh. There never was and there never will be an actual case of a ben sorer umoreh. Okay, thank you, Gemara. So why is it in the Bible? Why did God put it here? He says, oh, well, they want to teach you this, they want to teach you that. You take the woman by force, and then you end up not loving your wife, and you end up hating her, and you have a rebellious child. Maybe that's the idea why. Maybe there's other things to see. But I want you to know that there was at least one rabbi that disagreed. And he said, there was at least one case of this ben sorer umoreh. And he says, I know it because I sat on his grave. Yes, there was at least one case. His name was Rabbi Yonatan. So he was convinced there was a case, but no case. So again, pay attention. The child does not listen to our voice. And from that odd grammatical construction of the noun, where the parents refer to our in plural and the voice in singular, so Rabbi Yehuda says, you know what that means? The parents, the voice of the mother and the father has to sound identical. You know what that means? That means that one of the parents calls the kid on the phone. He says, hello? The parent starts talking. Guy doesn't know if it's mom or his dad. They sound identical. And not only that, the Gemara then goes and says, they have to be of the same height. If one's taller and they got to sound identical, they got to look identical. Wow, this is There's going to be some great family photos for this one for sure, you know. So the parents have to be equal in height, equal in appearance. So what that means is relax. The most rebellious child in the world would not meet the technical requirements to be susceptible to the death penalty as a ben sorer umoreh. So what's the point of all these odd requirements? Why does Rabbi Yehuda go out of his way? Oh, they got to sound the same, look the same height, so that when he's looking at them, he sees identical. Now, they always tell you in parenting to get your message clear. The mother and the father, they should have an agreement how we're going to raise our kid. What, you know, and here, it's like if they sound completely identical, you're killing the kid. So maybe that message has to have a little tweak to it. So maybe what Rabbi Yehuda is doing is telling you how a child becomes a ben sorer umoreh. It's clear that you have to have harmony. There has to be that message the child receives from both parents as he begins to mature. But when two parents literally sound identical, anyone here ever studied physics? What happens when you have two sound waves that are identical? What happens? What do? They cut out, they cancel each other out.
Right.
Am I right? Someone? Is that God speaking? Who is that? God, am I right? That's the way it works. When the two sounds of equal wavelength, they cancel each other out. Oh boy. So both parents are saying the exact same thing. Stereo, you know. Clearly, the parents, they have to act in tandem. They have to have harmony in the worldviews and the values that they communicate to their children. But imagine this. If you are so rigid as parents in your ideology that you look at the world in such a narrow way, both of you, the husband and the wife, both look at the world the same way, then the child grows up and that's all he ever hears is your narrow way of, see those people, they're no good, and that guy will cheat you, and this is bad, always do this, always do that. And instead of being able to differentiate between the father and the mother, that was the greatest thing for me growing up, was having a father that was a certain way and a mother that was a certain way. And I knew when to approach my mom and when to approach my dad. Because my dad was the enforcer. My mom was like, oh, okay, don't worry about it. You know, I'll talk to him, you know. Or as we say in Judaism, we have Shema b'ni, Musar avicha. My son, listen to the Musar. Those are the moral, ethical teachings of your father. Ve'al titosh Torat imecha. And don't turn away from the Torah of your mother. So you have two different terms for a father and mother. You have Musar for the father, the strict, the rule, this is how it has to be. And the mother has Torah. And Torah is, you know, a little nicer sometimes, you know. And if you don't have a difference between the father and the mother, if they're exactly identical, then that's the path that can lead to rebellion. And because if the parents are both exactly the same height, the child sees everything the same. They sound the same. They're the same height. Everything is the same perspective. And having parents view the world exactly the same, it can really rob a child of some actually very complementary ways to look at things that he's never experienced before. Because if everything he gets is identical, now we want parents to agree. We want to be religious. We don't want to go out with this. We don't want to do that. We want, you know, you have to have a framework for raising a family. But it doesn't mean you have to be identical to the letter. My wife and I are miles apart on some issues philosophically. That's what makes us strong. And every once in a while, I tell her, what you say has merit, you know, which is a nice way of saying, you're right, but who cares, you know? Don't. You ever hear where they talk about, you know, certain people that are related to each other shouldn't really marry each other because you have too much overlapping in the gene pool, right? Yeah. So that's on a physical sense. What happens when that happens spiritually? They're identical, the mother and the father. They're overlapping. The child is not going to come out with healthy. He's going to come out with a limited, narrow definition of the world. And that is something that we can avoid the effects of the Ben Sorer Moreh. So what Rabbi Yehuda was doing with his principles, have the parents agree, but let's see what happens. So now, don't be exactly the same. You have to have harmony and agreement, but you don't have to be so rigid that you have to everything exactly the same. And unfortunately, I see some people that have become religious, that they learn from one rabbi, both the husband and the wife, and they follow him to the letter of everything, which is a good thing, but to the point where they sound identical to me. I'm talking to one, I could be talking to the other. And it's like, what happened to your personality? Mm-hmm. What happened to who you are? I want to know what you think, not what your rabbi thinks. It's good that you have a framework, but you have a mind also. So that's the point I'm trying to get at. Now, we started talking about Ishmael, right? And this whole case about forget the fact that Ishmael's parents, they didn't look the same. They weren't the same height. They didn't sound the same. They were very different. But God says, no, I can't kill him. Right now, he's simply an innocent child. I'm not killing Ishmael. But God tells us in his Torah, kill this wayward and rebellious son. So why is he not judged the same way as Ishmael was judged? And we read about this on Rosh Hashanah of all days. You know why? Anyone have an idea? I hope you're not disappointed by the answer. The sentences in the Torah that describe the rebellious son stress that he did not listen to the words of his mom and of his dad. And if you don't listen to rebuke or criticism, you have little chance of ever doing teshuvah.
Why would you listen to that?
Exactly.
If you don't
Right.
listen to your mother.
Right. Now, there's no indication that Ishmael ever refused to listen. He just wasn't told to clean up his act. It was just sent away. Sarah wasn't exactly the forgiving type of mother. This kid's bad. Avram. 86, I'm out. I don't want him around. That's it. There was little hope for Ishmael. I don't want him here. But had they spoke to him and he denied the criticism and he denied any type of making him a better person, then he would have been killed immediately. That's the Ben Sorer Morer. The parents said, we tried, we chastised him, we talked to him, we rewarded him for good things and punished him for bad things. We did everything we could. He refused to change. The kid was unwilling to acknowledge that he was doing something wrong. And someone who's unwilling to acknowledge that they're doing something wrong, there's no chance that they can ever make teshuvah. That's why he was executed, because of his end. We know what his end is going to be, because he doesn't listen to musar, he doesn't listen to rebuke, doesn't listen to criticism. Ishmael, maybe he did. And by the way, there are rabbis that say he did listen. At the end of his life, he did make teshuvah, and he came back and he made peace with Abraham, and he returned to God. Do you hear my point?
Yes.
I don't know if I brought it home clear enough, but trying to absorb what I'm saying. When I'm trying to say this in a nutshell, Ben Sorer and Moren, the parents tried, and they couldn't. And finally, when they couldn't take it anymore, they did everything they could. Then they take him to the elders, and the elders, this is true, okay, and the whole town comes out, and they stone him, and they watch it, and everyone sees it, and everyone gets afraid. Now, again, it never happened. Or maybe it happened one time according to one rabbi, but we don't even know what that means, if he was being literal or not. The rabbi said it didn't happen, probably it didn't happen. So why is it in the Torah? Because there's a lesson we can learn. I hope that I pointed out a lesson that you can learn from it. And the lesson is, have harmony, but don't be a clone of each other. Don't be a carbon copy to where you sound like I can't tell if it's you or you anymore. I sound like I'm listening to the same person. That's, I used to joke with Rabbi Block about another shul that a lot of people went to, and we couldn't understand why they went there. We said, why would they go to that shul rather than going to my shul or his shul? And I said, you know why? Because it's a personality-free shul. It's for people who don't have a personality. They just go, I got a book, I got to read the words, and then I got to leave. That's not what being Jewish is about. That's not what Torah is about. That's not what personality is about. We're not rigid like that. You have to be yourself. And that's why no two people are created the same. If we were all created the same, okay, God would make you an angel. That's it, finished. No free choice. You just only do good. Everyone gets rewarded. No challenge. Go home, enjoy yourself. But that's not life, is it? Is it? It's not. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Okay, now, the guy that's on a path of destruction, he can avoid it if he does this. By the way, I want to tell you something. Some people live in denial. And when I say denial, I don't mean only that river in Egypt, but one of them was Paro. Paro, the king Paro, the king of the Nile, right? King of the Nile. Whenever Paro was warned by Moshe of impending doom, after the different plagues, what did Paro do? Every time Moshe told him, you better let my people go, or else, plague 1, plague 2, plague 3. What did Paro do every time? He ran inside his palace and he closed the door and he pretended like nothing happened, he forgot all about the warning. You know who else did this? Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the wicked tyrant of the Babylonians, the one that destroyed the temple. The fact that these rulers would go enter into their palaces whenever they're facing doom, it's like, don't worry about it, leave me alone, I'm going to go inside. They go into the basement and close the door. Don't worry, we'll win the election. Close the door, everything will be okay. Yeah. It's not a coincidence.
He ran out.
I didn't say that. The reason is because for a lot of these people, Paro, for Nebuchadnezzar, their arrogance is rooted in their palaces. Their conceit that they have. Conceit is not an intellectual response. We were talking about this before. Someone who's conceited, that's an emotional response, right? The guy has a beautiful home, a lavish home, it's decorated, it's all beautiful. That triggers conceit, ga'ava, haughtiness within him. I'm better than you. Look at my house. Look at how nice things I have. And that's what was Paro. He was so powerful that he ignored the first 9 warnings of Moshe. He locked himself in his beautiful palace. Moshe, I don't care what you're saying. You're God and you're going to do this and destroy that. And even though he did them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, Paro closed the door. He's in the palace. And that's when Moshe had to go. Enjoy your house. Enjoy your home for everything it is. But don't let it affect your view of personal success or goals in your life. And that's that. So now, I just want to tell you, before we go, I'm not listening, but a couple more minutes. There's 3 judgments that every person goes through. I'm a little emotional. 5 minutes before I was here, I was with someone who was dying, and there's a special prayer we read when they're dying, and you tell them, some people read this with the rabbi, or the rabbi reads it for them if you can't, and they survive. And some people don't, but you should at least be pure with God. There are 3 judgments that all souls go through by heavenly court. One of them is Rosh Hashanah. Right? It's coming, Rosh Hashanah. We're all going to be judged. You're going to live? You're not going to live. You're going to make $20,000? You're going to make $120,000 next year. $220,000. Whatever. It's decided on Rosh Hashanah. Nothing you can do about it. You have to do your hishtadlut. You got to do your work. And the last one is, and when one dies, that's the second one. So Rosh Hashanah is the first one. The second thing that we're all judged by God is the day of death. And the third is at the resurrection. We all know from the Rambam's 13 principles, 13th principle, we believe in the resurrection of the dead. I don't have to tell you what it's all about. You've all learned that. when Shaul HaMelech, King Shaul, did something that he wasn't supposed to do. He brought the soul of the Navi Shemuel down to earth after he was dead. And he asked him about his fate in the upcoming war. Shemuel's soul was so trembling, so much so that he brought along Moshe Rabbeinu with him as like an attorney for him. Shemuel was afraid of the judgment of the end of days. Shemuel was afraid of Techiyat HaMetim, of the resurrection of the dead. Why? Why did he fear the end of days? Why did he fear the judgment of the resurrection? When he died, he was judged. And God said, you are equal to Moshe and Aaron together. Moshe ve'Aaron v'Choanav u'Shmuel. And Moshe and Aaron are on one scale, and Shmuel's over there, and he's equal to both Moshe and Aaron. You know why? Because at the final judgment, the day of the resurrection of the dead, God will judge you for ripple effects, for things that you did in your life, for all the results of your actions, for good or for bad. It's a ripple effect, and it keeps on going even after we don't. Shemuel was afraid that there would be repercussions for the actions of things that he did, children, students, followers. Because if you're in a person of influence, or even not, even within your own home, even with yourself, when God judged Cain for killing his brother Cain killing Abel, God said, "Kol demei achicha tzoakim elai min ha'adamah." It does not say that God said the blood of your brother is crying to me from the ground. It says the bloods, demei achicha, the bloods of your brother are crying out for vengeance. Well, what are you talking about? He says, well, judgment concerns every outcome, present, future of your actions. That's why we say Shema Yisrael. Listen, Hashem, when we accept the oath of heaven, because Judaism is accepting God in a way that will have a ripple effect, influencing others. And that's why on Rosh Hashanah, as we're getting back to this idea, that we're judged by God on how effective we were in bringing godliness to the world. We say that God is Maloch HaKol Ha'olam Kulo B'Chvodach. God rules over the whole world. And so you have to ask, are you putting more godliness in this world? Because you think that, okay, I'm a good guy. I lived, 70, 80, 90 years. I gave a lot of money to charity. I gave a lot of time to my committees and the different, I helped out with the bingo and I helped out with the kiddush. And I did all kinds of good charity work in my life. So there's ripple effects. But there's a ripple effect for everything and everything that you do. And that's something I really want you to think about these ripple effects. Because Judaism, what you're studying, what we're learning, is about bringing godliness into everyday life so that he can bless us. And that's what the month of Tishrei is. It's a month of being judged. And that's the whole idea. I just want to tell you, end up with a story, if I can tell you this thing. Amazing story. There was a Rebbitzin, her name was Rebbitzin Shemesh. And she told a story about a guy who was a very religious guy. And he was a singer with an orchestra. And they would go around and they would play at weddings and bar mitzvahs and things like this. And he's in Israel. And he gets a call. He goes, can you come play our wedding? And he's very famous for being a religious singer with a religious band. Everyone knows, sure. He sets a time, sets a place, sets a price. And the day of the wedding, he gets there early to set up his orchestra, to set up with his band. And he looks around, I must be in the wrong place. There's a whole lot of people that are not dressed like they're religious people over here. And there's a lot of men that are hanging out with the women. There's a lot of this. This is not my kind of scene. So he tells the bride and groom, he says, listen, I'm sorry. Listen, I'm a religious guy. I don't play these kind of gigs, never have, and I never will. They said, what are you talking about? We hired you. It's our wedding day. You're going to leave us without a band? Come on, get it together. No, you don't understand. I can't. There's a commotion. The day is ruined. There was an attorney that was there who went up and he said, I don't know the dollar amount, but he says, there's a law in Israel that if you sign a contract that you agree to play as a musician, for this thing, there's a fine. Let's say it's $10,000 fine. I don't know what it was, 10,000 shekels. I don't know what it was, but there was a fine, and this was the law in Israel. This is true. You have to do it, or you're going to be fined. The guy said, "I'll pay the fine. I can't do this. I'm a religious guy, and I have faith in my principles. I'm just not going to do it." No, you have to. You have to. No, send me the bill. I'll pay it. I promise. And with that, he took his stuff and he walked out. Left them without a band on the day of their wedding. Can you imagine what they were thinking of this guy? 2 years later, he gets a phone call. We had a son, and after 30 days, you make a ceremony called Pidyon Ben. And we want you to come play. He doesn't recognize the name. Okay. Pidyon Ben is a Jewish, religious, Orthodox kind of ceremony. Okay. So he shows up at the appointed date and time, starts setting up, and they come up to him, and it was the same bride and groom from 2 years ago. And they said, "You don't recognize us, do you?" He says, "No, should I?" He says, "You don't remember 2 years ago you came to a wedding and you refused to play?" He says, "Yeah." He said, "That was our wedding." He says, "What happened?" He says, "Well, after that night, my husband and I were talking, and we said, to see a person with this kind of principle, who else would take a $10,000 fine and stick to his principles? Who else? Where else? Show me another religion. Show me another place where someone would act that way for what they believe in to God." And they said to each other, if this man has this kind of conviction, we want to know more about this religion. And slowly, over the next 2 years, they started asking and learning and going to classes. Finally, they became observant. And they said when they had a boy, they wanted to invite this guy to not only to pay him to play at their simcha, but to return the $10,000 of the fine. I want to wish you all a Shana Tova. That was the true story. So anyways, I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. And if I don't see you before, some of you I'll see, but if I don't see you all before the holiday, Tizku L'Shem Rabot, have a wonderful, joyous, amazing time. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. Thank you.
לגבי שמואל, הוא התנגד לנבחרת המתים?